Hi everyone, my name is Charlie and today I have the end of the decade book tag. This tag was created by Kat over at Brews and Reviews and I was tagged by the creator after begging her on Twitter basically. So what we are doing in this tag is we are looking at the last decade in sections of 3 years at a time, I think, and then we're going to talk about our favourites and reading habits and all that fun stuff. And it's going to be unpleasant. It's going to be full of nostalgia for the terrible books that we have read in our time on this planet, and I am here for it. So firstly, we are going to be looking at 2010, that's 5, but we're going to be looking from 2010 to 2013. And the first question that we have to answer is, how much did you read? 2010 is the year that I started at uni, and I didn't actually start recording the books that I read until 2011. So in 2011, I read 70 books. 2012, I read 71 books. And in 2013, I read 68. So we're going to average it at about 70 and say 70 over the 4 years, so 280 books from 2010 to 2013. And then, what genre did you read the most? And I actually know that that was when I was doing my young adult reading. That's when I read all of my YA. And so I discovered the young adult genre with City of Bones, and I first read that in 2008. And that was back when I was writing my own young adult book, The Soul That Rises, and my book was basically a complete rip-off of Buffy Season 5, but I was here for all of the books that were YA fantasy, that were all about demons and angels and fairies and that sort of thing. Kat mentions in her video the Wicked Lovely series. I like that. I like the Demons Lexicon series by Rees Brennan. I still have that. I also read Something Strange and Deadly by Susan Dennard in that time. And there are so many. Let's actually look at the book to see what we read. That was when I read a lot of Agatha Raisin, because I was getting into reading cozy crime then. Clockwork Angel. I read that for the first time in 2011. Then we have the Lauren Kate books. Does anybody remember those, or is everyone like me trying to forget them? Then there's another series I've got in here that was by... oh, I can't even remember her name now. She wrote a book called... it was Alyson Noel, and I read a few books of her Evermore series, and I used to read those in about an hour. I didn't like them, but it was just something that I read. I can't look at 2010 because I don't have those books here, but in 2011 there are Paranormalcy by Kiersten White, Beautiful Creatures. We know I'm just filled with nostalgia as I look at this book. There are even books here that I read for uni for the first time, and that's probably what was expanding my horizons of reading more adult fiction, and also discovering I was getting strange ideas of what should be done in fiction at this time, and it was really putting me off a lot of books. And I didn't actually discover one of my favourite books, The Lacuna by Barbara Kingsolver. I read that in 2011 for the first time, and that book astounded me. And should I be able to one day write something with such breadth, I would be happy. Sorry, I'm skipping ahead. I'm just doing all these questions at once. So we've got, what were your favourite books and authors? Is there a book you wish you'd read during this time period? And do you have any regrets about your reading during this time period? I'll just cover all those whilst we're looking at my book. Daughter of Smoke and Bone. Now, I feel like I'm the only person in the world who didn't like that book. We're into 2012 now. This was also the year that I discovered Holly Black's White Cat series. I love that series so much. Especially in terms of just general writing. I think that is a YA series that also has some great writing. There's so much brilliant setup and payoff in that series, and I don't think it got the recognition that it deserved, because everyone was just thinking, oh, Holly Black is Cassandra Clare's friend at the time, and that was great. And I knew of Holly Black before I knew of Cassandra Clare. I'd seen her books a lot when I was younger, and so whilst I wasn't the biggest fan of her Tithe and Valiant and Ironside books, the White Cat books are still on my shelf. It is very limited in terms of young adult, but it's there. 2012 also discovered Peaches for Monsieur le Carré by Joanne Harris. Adore her writing, but I had done for a while then. Here we are with, oh my god, can I talk about my most hated book here? A Pair of Blue Eyes by Thomas Hardy. I despise that book so much. There is not a single bone in my body that likes that book. At some point in there, it says that he wrote this book about his love for his wife, Emma, and he's so horrible to the protagonist in this. He describes her as dumb all the time. I hate it. I abhor it. This was also... Oh, so here's where I read something strange and deadly. In 2012, funny story about that. Susan Dennard followed her career for years. As you know, I'm still a fan of the Witchlands books. I read them, and I ordered an American copy just so I could get it signed. That's how much I love this writer. This was also the year that whilst blogging, I ended up going on Goodreads and ended up with people actually sending me ebooks to review, and I was horrible and I hated them all. Oh, goodness gracious. Wow. I didn't expect to see these books on here. You know, when you look at something and you remember a really major thing that happened in your life. That just happened for me, and it's weird. So yeah, then I ended up reading The Casual Vacancy by J.K. Rowling. As we know, J.K. Rowling, fantastic writer. Well, no, I can't say she's a fantastic writer. Do I believe that anymore? I don't know. However, The Casual Vacancy was important for me to read. It took me a month to read. I was back at uni. It was really amping up there. And this was my final year of uni, started here. And you can tell because I've been reading a considerable amount and then it completely slowed down for the final year. I also gave up volunteering. I gave up all my spare time and dedicated it to my course. I read No Country for Old Men by Cormac McCarthy and found a completely new way of writing, and the prose felt alive to me, and this was when my views on writing started to change. This is going to be a long video. I'm sorry, I hope you're here for it. Then we move on into 2013, and I read The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe for the first time, and I hated it. I don't like Narnia. It's not because of the religious allegory, and I might be the only person to say that I prefer the TV show to the TV show and the film to the books, but that's where I am with that one. What reading Narnia has done for me. I was never one of these people who read Narnia as a child. I didn't read His Dark Materials as a child. I'm mentioning this because when I read His Dark Materials, and I read it as a sort of antithesis, I can't say that word this early in the morning, to Narnia, it really improved both of those books for me in my estimations. So there's that. This was also the year I was continuing to read more thrillers because I loved thrillers. I'll never be able to write one. Still love them. I like them. I like the horror genre now because of thrillers. I realised that horror gives you the same sort of thing as a thriller does. I've yet to find anything in horror that's been as grotesque as some of the things I've read in thrillers. This was the year in 2013 when I read The Night Circus, and I remember this was also 2013 is the year that I went to Bath, and I saw all of my friends I'd made from the internet, and I had gave a very poor first impression because I can't eat in front of new people, and whilst I'd spoken to them on the internet for ages, I couldn't eat in front of them. So I went a few days without eating, lost half a stone over those few days, so that was fantastic. And I couldn't sleep because it was sleeping around strange people. And I've always been incredibly apologetic about that time that I didn't give my friends the best impression of me, and I ended up losing contact with some of them because I gave such a bad first impression. And they're doing great things in their life, and one of them has gone on and works as an editor for children's fiction at a big publishing house, and it astounds me that all these people are doing great things with their lives, and I'm incredibly proud to have known them at some point. And that was when we saw J.K. Rowling together. We got our book signed, and I had got this great idea to say, "How are you?" to her, and my very charismatic Irish friend happened to be in line in front of me and said it first, and so I just stood there smiling at her like some strange, crazed stalker. But you can't really go on to tell someone who helped you process grief as a child everything they did for you, so a smile was all I could give. This was the year that I discovered Paranormal Romance. It's the year that I finished reading the wicked, lovely Melissa Marr series. It's the year that I read the Red Pyramid, I can't remember what it's called, series by Rick Riordan, love that series. Much prefer it to the Percy Jackson series, so much so that series got me into reading the Kane Chronicles, that's what it's called. The Kane Chronicles got me into reading Percy Jackson, and I prefer the Kane Chronicles, and I've never read much more that Rick Riordan's read since, because I think I missed the boat on that one. Also the year that I first got my first paid job for the charity that I still work for. So I've been there for 12 years now, and for 6 of them I have been employed. We're getting on, it'll be 7 next year. We know that I had a pretty terrible time of it with my first year with this charity, and there is The Ocean at the End of the Lane here that I read on the 6th of the 9th, and my friend Lindsay and Lily, and I think Lizzie went as well, if there were more, Lydia maybe, they got me a copy and they got it signed by Neil Gaiman, and so that was a reminder of a bit of a terrible time. Then The Testament of Mary, that I've just repurchased from the charity shop because I wanted to read it this Christmas. Really like that one. So we've done 2010 to 2013. Let's hope we don't go on so much. Is there a book that I'd wish I read during that time period? Yes, actually. I wish that I had read some more. There's some, I can't think of them now, but in terms of a genre, I wish I'd read more young adult books than I did actually read, because this was the period of time before I started reading more adult books, and I have since read YA books that were popular at that time, and I don't feel the same way, and I know that had I read them then, I would have preferred them then as opposed to now, and I know that my reviews for them would have been completely different, but I think that's the same for everyone. Do I have any regrets about my reading? No. I feel like I could have read more. I was looking through that and there's a lot of Harry Potter, and I wish I hadn't read Harry Potter as much as I did, but I was still so much of a fanboy for that series, and I was still, like, 2013 is the year that I started writing my own children's book. Lord, I've been writing that for a while. It fits that I'd read so much children's literature, which is what I was doing. I was reading a lot of children's books that I'd missed out on as a child. I was reading new, more modern ones as well. No, I don't really have any regrets. Let's go into 2014 to 16. So 2014, we read 110 books. Then in 2015, we read 85 books. Now, this next year, I'm going to be incredibly sad about, because if you don't know, 2016 is the year that I fell into the period of unfathomable sadness, and I was very upset for the first third of that year. I started YouTube in 2015, so I know that 2016 isn't filled with much good reading, but we'll get to that in a minute. So I read 60 books, so how many is that? I don't know. 110 and 60 is 170, add 85 is 255. It's less, isn't it? It's fewer books than it had been. What genre did you read the most? I actually believe, yeah, the first year, so 2014, I read a lot more children's books than I had read previously, because I was still working on my own children's book. 2015 is when I really got into reading more adult fiction, so that's what I did. And then 2016 is just primarily adult, grown-up, general fiction, because I'd transitioned from reading young adult literature and I was viewing it under a very harsh lens, and I hadn't yet reached this point where I was thinking that you should review something in terms of the genre and the age bracket that it's aimed towards, and I wasn't doing that. I was reviewing everything as though it all had to be this amazing general fiction, and it all had to follow the rules that I'd created for writing. So this is the year that I was properly reading Agatha Christie. Again, I met my friend Lindsay. We went to see Brandon Sanderson in Manchester this year. I can't see any books on here that I would necessarily go back to. There aren't any favourites in 2014. It's a very mediocre year. 2015 is the first year I started BookTube, as mentioned. I've read some more YA. This is my proper last year of reading YA. So I read the Kat Zhang series with What's Left of Me. I read some of Sarah J. Maas, and I gave good reviews at the time, but since discussions with my friend Lindsay and all that fun stuff, I don't care for those books. I read another series by Sarah Rees Brennan. I think it was called Unspoken. I can't remember what it was called, the actual series title was. I started reading the Mistborn trilogy, and I only ever read the first book because I finished the first book and I thought, oh, that was a great end, I don't need to read the series, which my friend Lindsay disagrees with. Lied to you before, because this was the year that I actually finished reading the Wicked Lovely series with Darkest Mercy on the 3rd of May 2015. That sat on my shelf for a long time. I really enjoyed certain books out of that series, but I didn't enjoy the series as a whole. And so there were certain books that I knew were out, but I wanted to read other books before them. And I like the second book, I like the third book, and I like the fourth book, but I don't like the first and the fifth book in that series. Sorry, my computer is doing something strange. This is also the year I read Mrs. Palfrey at the Claremont, and I recommend that to you. Read Ready Player One. I don't like that book, but I also read The Luminaries, and I adore that book. And I also read what's it called? Marissa Meyer wrote it. I'm looking at it now. It's one of my favourite YA series, even though other people dislike it. Oh, I can't remember what it's called. I really want to read, like, there's graphic novels and extra expanded universe stuff with it, isn't there? And I've just never got around to that, but you know what I'm talking about. I'm looking at it in the hope. The Lunar Chronicles, Flaming Egg. Yeah, love that series. Not looking at it, yeah. And then we had 2016, didn't we? Can we just not talk about that one and pretend we did? I discovered Robin Hobb that year, and that was probably the best thing to come from 2016 was Sam's nonsense, novels and nonsense, revealing, like, starting the Hobb along, and I got to read Robin Hobb, and the first series reminded me of Harry Potter. It gave me that nostalgia, and Bookkeep very much ended up having that same feeling of home that Hogwarts had had. And that first trilogy very much felt like reading Harry Potter again to me. And then the world went into such a way over the last few years of me reading those books. And I never would have thought it would go there from my first reading. So I am incredibly appreciative of just that writer and the breadth of work there. Oh my lord, I could fanboy all day over that series. Yeah, you've heard my favourite books and authors because I've gone through the list. We had Robin Hobb. At the start, in 2010 to 13, it was always Cassandra Clare. I recommended her to everybody. My favourite authors are the favourite authors that are still on my shelves. So we've got Susan Dennard. Adore that writer's work. Marissa Meyer. There is such a breadth of work here, and I'm going to use that word a lot today, that I've really had a fantastic time of reading in those 6 years. Or 7 years. I don't know how maths works. And now we're getting into this is the actual major part where I can talk about BookTube. 2017, I read 107 books. 2018, I read 86 books. So 193. And then this year, I have so far read 164 books, but I've not read since the 20th of November. So we're going over 300 there, aren't we? So it's the last 3 years, I've read more than I had read previously. So there's something that we could say that BookTube has done for me. We can say that BookTube increased the amount that I read, but also 2017, obviously, I've switched shops in that time. I'm on a different premises. I'm reading a lot more poetry, so poetry books are rather short. I probably don't watch as much television as I did. I stopped watching Arrow at season 5. I took more time to read. I realised there are certain moods I'm in when I can take a day to read. I stopped volunteering at the Macclesfield shop whilst I was paid at points, and I just thought, do you know what? I need to take advantage of my days off to YouTube, to read, to write, to, you know, there was a reason I got a job that was only part-time, and that was to make the most of my career as a writer, and I hadn't been doing that. And so that's what I did in 2017. I released Indisputably Doris. I've released Doris Ahoy. I wrote An Heir to Murder. I worked a lot on the children's book. 4 books over 3 years' work. I'm currently working on the final Doris book, as well as going to be releasing another. So, you know, that was what my main focus was, and reading comes a lot into my writing because I refuel with reading, if that makes sense. And I wanted to get a lot of the books read on my shelves as opposed to just accumulating tons of books. And so that was what the big change was in this time. I reread Furiously Happy in 2017. I previously read it in 2016. It really helped me realise just what anxiety, what depression was. I have never been properly diagnosed, but I've talked about that before. I don't think I need to, simply because I recognise my sadness and I don't think it comes to the same levels as other people. This is also the year that I started listening to the Terry Pratchett books, and I became very invested in audiobooks, and whenever I went on a walk or something, I'd listen to an audiobook. Pachinko by Minion Lee. I can't believe it's been nearly 3 years since I read that book because I still think about it often, and I thought I would have reread it by now. The Antiques by Chris D'Agostino. I abhor that book. And then we have Mort. I can't believe it. It's been that long. It's been nearly 3 years since I listened to More by Terry Pratchett. Again, another book that I adore. So Terry Pratchett, there we have. Another writer I adore. Sebastian de Castell's here. Lonesome Dove. Sorry, 2017 was a fantastic bloody year, wasn't it? Oh, goodness gracious. I've just discovered that I actually read a poetry collection here. Not a poetry collection, a short story collection. And I gave that away about 2 years ago, maybe more, thinking that I hadn't read it. So that's fun. I'm just going through. I read Our Mutual Friend in 2017, and I recommend that to people. I can't believe that this is the time that my brother moved to Northumberland. It didn't seem that long ago. Did I just do nothing in 2018? Because I swear I only read these books a year ago. Right, we're at 2008. I can't believe it. This is astounding for me. 2017, fantastic reading year, some great writers in there. So now we're on to 2018, and once again, I thought I only read these books this year. Wow. Okay, so until April, no, we read The Hoarder in March of 2018, and we read And After Many Days by Joanne in April 2018, and they're the only books on that page that are worth talking about. Have I read anything this year at all? Oh my god, I know I've read, oh bloody hell. Sorry, I just can't believe that all these books were last year. It's so weird to look at. Wow. Read The Museum of Innocence last year. Stormkeeper's Island, great children's book, Driven by Dane Cobain of Dane Reads. Nevermore. Wow. These are some... I mean, this year is not a year of genres, clearly, unless we're talking about, like, genres in terms of, like, crime and fantasy. I read them. I always read them. They're my go-tos. In terms of anything other than adult fiction, then I don't really know what to say. And then we have this year that I'm going to have to look at now. And, I mean, is it going to astound me as much as I was just astounded by 2018? So, as we know, last year, because I mention it all the time, I fell off a ladder. I cracked my head open, I had a concussion. So I disappeared from YouTube for a few months. And so at the start of this year, I listened/read to 22 books in January, the most books I'd ever read in a month, and yes, I was just competing with myself at this point. I read The Murder of Roger Ackroyd by Agatha Christie, which has fast become one of my most hated books of all time, but I did listen to a lot more Terry Pratchett. I got into reading Jo Nesbø, and they are just one and done books that I recommend for like your holiday and everything. I got to read Susan Dennard's Blood Witch and Sight Witch, which are both fantastic. I read Her Body in Other Parties. I remember listening to Six of Crows because, if you remember, I was denying that I had an upper respiratory tract infection, which I don't recommend to anybody at all. And I did that, and I listened to Six of Crows. I was supposed to meet Abercrombie, and I'd woken up with my throat feeling swollen as anything. I hadn't slept, but I was like, she's invited me, we're going. I walked to her house, which it's half an hour away, and I was listening to Six of Crows, and then I rang her because she wasn't letting me in, and she revealed that she was still in bed ill, and I said, no, it's fine. I'm trying to speak normally, but knowing I couldn't. And so rather than ring anybody to come and collect me because I was perfectly ill, I had a fever, I chose to walk back along the canal, thinking that a walk in somewhat fresh air would do me good whilst listening to the end of Six of Crows. And so I remember that book primarily because I listened to it whilst completely floored. I got home and went to bed, and then continued to deny the fact that I had anything more than the common cold, and then ended up having to take antibiotics. I gave whatever I had to my co-worker so that she ended up off work as well. Our manager ended up having to work a Wednesday, which is practically unheard of, because we were both just completely gone. And I never want to have that again, so naturally I'll probably get it in February. Some people like to say it's because I stopped having a flu jab last year. I'm not an anti-vaxxer, it's just that I couldn't find any time to have it. And I finished reading Robin Hobb's books in the Elderling series this year. This year wasn't the year I cried though. Discovered The Half God of Rainfall, recommend that one. Oh, and the stuff I've vlogged about, Things in Jars by Jess Kidd, recommend that. Milk by Emma Rosen of Emma Rosen Books. If you haven't read that, you really ought to read it. If you haven't read it in Non-Fiction November, then I'm annoyed with you and you should go and do that. But I didn't read anything in Non-Fiction November, so I can't say anything. My friend Joy released a book this year, which was somewhere in here. When did she release your book? When did she release your book? Wings, Planes and Weather Vanes. 25th of April, and then you have Life Thinly Sliced by Patrick Prinsloo, another writer I work with. I don't work with him. We don't work together. We're both at the same writers group. Then we have The Strawberry Thief by Joanne Harris, That Made Me Stop Everything. Assassin's Fate by Robin Hobb. The Poppy War. Can we just... The Poppy War is trash, okay? It's not the best written thing in the world. It talks about Asian mythology and history, and I know that it upsets certain people, and I get that, and I understand that, and I've looked at all, you know, I've read all the things that people it upsets, I've looked at the trigger warnings, I've done all of that. I still think it's trash, I still think it's written like YA, and I still love it. Then we have Malmoth by Sarah Perry that I read with Abby of Abby McReed. Buddy read, one of the best buddy reads I've ever done. We gave some proper critical analysis to this book, and it put that book on the best books of the year list for me, and if I hadn't been reading that with Abby, that would never have happened. So I thank Abby for that. Salamander, love that book. Let's not talk about the fact that I read all those crime books and hated them. Cannery Row, I was supposed to read that with Dane. Didn't happen, did it? Oh, the 13th Tale. I discovered the 13th Tale this year after years of not reading it. But yeah, this year, everything has kind of changed in reading because I read everything now. Everything. I read absolutely everything. The only thing I don't read is romance, and that's just because it's 2019, romance is dead. There's no book that I wish I'd read in the last 3 years because I got rid of that. I got rid of regrets. I got rid of all that. I live in the present. If I don't read it now, I'll read it in the future. If I never want to read it, that's okay, and that's okay for you too. When did you find BookTube? Did it change your reading habits? I was watching BookTube in 2010 but didn't start till 2015, as aforementioned, because I thought I was too fat to BookTube. It did change my reading habits because the people I was watching, I started watching all the very lively American people who, I have no problem with them being lively. They were reading young adult literature. I was reading young adult literature. It was great to see people who loved books talking about their love of fiction. And then in 2015, I discovered the more British YouTubers and booktubers, and I ended up realising that I could booktube and there was something more sedate about them, and that's what I wanted at the time. How do you think your reading has changed over the last decade? I'm reading more. I'm not being so, not choosy. I am not being so judgmental before going into a book, and I'm allowing myself the chance to actually judge it for myself. As I've seen from that, I knew that I'd stopped reading young adult literature. I knew it wasn't going to come into this much more at the end of the video. I ended up reading some huge books because I gave over feeling like huge books were taking up more time than smaller books, and I could get more smaller books read in the time it took to read a huge book. I gave up feeling like that. I discovered audiobooks, and everything became about literature to me. My entire life has been surrounded by words at this point for the last 3 years, and that's not the way it was before because I actually had a life. And I do have a life now. It's just that my life is more surrounded by BookTube and surrounded by books, and in the last few years I've actually ended up messaging people more, and there are people on this platform that I call friends, so that's what BookTube did for me. My life became much more lived through the computer and lived through a screen, and so I'm living the lifestyle that the older people warn against, but frankly they were living their lives through a radio and telephones, weren't they, so they can jog on as well. I should tag some people, so as we know, I am going to tag Dane of Dane Rees, I'm tagging Emma of Emma Rosen Books, I'm tagging Sophie of Redhead Reading because I'm tagging her all the time now, I'm tagging Doris of All the Books, I am tagging Will of Ball Book, I'm tagging Abby of Abby McRees, I am trying to tag everybody I can think of, and this is difficult. I want to tag Charlie of Charlie Brook, and I want to tag Emily of Novel Novels, despite the fact I know they have tons of videos already planned and won't be able to fit these videos in this year. But I don't think it matters. We're talking about the end of a decade. It doesn't matter when it comes. We know the decade is ending. I need 2 more people. Well, the other 2 people aren't around much anymore, so that's upsetting. I'm tagging you and I'm tagging your mother. And that's that. That is the end of the decade book tag. Thank you to Kat for tagging me. It's been strange. I didn't expect this video to go on so long, but this is what happens when you ask me to talk about a decade of books. I hope that you have enjoyed this video, and until next time, that is all.